Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive? Today we're cracking open High Output Management by Andrew S. Grove.
Ooh, a classic.
Absolutely, it's packed with wisdom.
Yeah, and we've got excerpts straight from the book, so we're getting right to the source.
No fluff, just pure insights to help you level up in any field, whether you're leading a team or just trying to master your own work.
And what I find fascinating is that Grove's ideas aren't just for managers in the traditional sense,
Right?
He dedicates the book to all the managers at Intel, where he was CEO, but honestly, his principles apply to anyone who wants to get things done.
You don't have to have manager in your title to benefit from this book.
Not at all.
So let's jump right into one of his core concepts.
Yeah.
Management as a production process.
Okay.
It might sound a bit, technical at first,
Right.
but he uses this really clever analogy of a breakfast factory to explain it.
I love a good analogy. Lay it on me.
All right, so imagine you're running this breakfast factory,
Okay, I'm in a...
and your goal is to get as many delicious breakfasts out to your customers as efficiently as possible, right?
Of course. Got to keep those customers happy and full.
You've got to cook those eggs, toast the bread, pour the coffee, all these different steps happening.
Sounds like my kind of factory.
But I'm guessing there's a catch.
Well, there always is.
So each of these steps, they take a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah.
And some steps inevitably take longer than others.
Always one thing slowing you down.
So let's say, just for example, that boiling the eggs takes 3 minutes, toasting the bread takes 2, and pouring coffee takes 1 minute.
All right, I'm following you.
Now, the step that takes the longest, in this case, those darn eggs, that becomes what Grove calls the limiting step.
the bottleneck.
Yes, it's the bottleneck that determines the overall output of the entire process.
So no matter how fast you pour that coffee, if those eggs aren't ready, you're stuck.
Exactly. Everything gets held up by that 3-minute egg.
Interesting.
And this idea of the limiting step, it's not just for breakfast.
No way.
This applies to any kind of work.
Oh, I can see that.
In fact, Grove even uses the criminal justice system as an example in the book.
Wow, okay.
He argues that the availability of jail cells
Oh, interesting.
often becomes the limiting step in the whole process of prosecuting criminals.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
Even though securing a conviction is obviously way more complex and expensive.
Yeah, so much more goes into it, but that one factor can hold everything back.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here is to identify the limiting step in your own work.
Right, find your bottleneck.
What's that 3-minute egg that's preventing you from delivering that metaphorical breakfast on time?
It's such a powerful question to consider.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
But sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes my work feels like a black box.
I know exactly what you mean.
You can't see what's going on inside.
Right, are things running smoothly? Who knows?
And that's where Grove says indicators come in.
Okay, tell me more about these indicators.
So indicators are like these little windows into that black box.
Oh.
They give us a glimpse into how well things are working, and they can even alert us to potential problems before they become major crises.
Ooh, like an early warning system?
Exactly.
I like it.
So one example from the book is the linearity indicator.
Okay, linearity indicator, what's that all about?
This helps you track your progress towards a goal
All right.
and see if you're on track to hit that target.
So you can course correct if needed.
Precisely. He uses this example of, college recruiting to explain this.
Okay.
You can plot the number of accepted job offers month by month, right?
Yeah.
And then compare that to like a straight line representing your hiring target for the year.
Gotcha.
And if your actual progress dips below that line, it's a warning sign that you might miss your goal.
Makes sense. You can see the problem developing.
Exactly. You can catch it early.
I like it.
And he introduces another tool called the stagger chart. Have you heard of that?
I'm not sure I have, no.
So this lets you compare multiple forecasts over time.
Okay.
So you can kind of get a feel for overall business trends.
See the big picture.
Yeah, like, are things generally improving or are they heading in the wrong direction?
Important questions.
And so it's like having a management dashboard to give you the insights you need to make better decisions.
I love that analogy. A management dashboard.
Right.
Yeah, because you wouldn't drive a car without a dashboard.
Exactly. You need those gauges to see what's going on.
So these indicators help us move from guesswork and intuition to data-driven decision-making.
Precisely.
Data is king.
Now, let's talk about making the most of our time.
Time is precious.
It is, especially as managers or really anyone who's trying to be more effective.
Absolutely.
So Grove dives into this concept of managerial leverage.
Oh, yeah. Leverage, that's all about maximizing our impact, right?
Exactly. And to understand leverage, we first need to define what a manager's output actually is.
Okay, so what is it?
It's not about checking off tasks on your to-do list.
No.
It's about how your actions influence the output of others.
Uh-huh. It's about the ripple effect.
It is. It's about amplifying your impact through others.
I like that.
And he even breaks down like a typical day in his own life,
Okay.
classifying his activities into information gathering, decision-making, and nudging.
Nudging.
Yeah, like giving someone a little push in the right direction.
No, I see, like a subtle influence.
Exactly. It could be a suggestion, a question, even just a look that influences someone's actions.
Interesting.
And Grove argues that these nudges, along with information gathering and decision-making, those are the core activities that really amplify a manager's impact.
It's not just about what you do yourself, it's about how you influence what others do.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that this leverage can be positive or negative.
Oh, right, there are two sides to every coin.
So things like, automating tasks or training employees, those would increase positive leverage.
Okay.
But then things like micromanaging or constantly discouraging someone, those would have the opposite effect.
Right, those are leverage killers.
They are. They diminish your impact.
So it all comes down to how much impact you create per unit of time invested.
Exactly. And to increase this leverage, Grove suggests 3 key approaches.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, increase your activity rate. So just do more things that have that potential for leverage.
Got it. More high-impact action.
Exactly. Second, increase the leverage of the activities you're already doing.
All right, so like making your meetings more efficient or delegating tasks.
Perfect examples.
Okay, what's the third approach?
So the third approach is to shift your focus to higher leverage activities altogether.
Okay, so prioritize the things that will move the needle the most.
Yes. Instead of getting bogged down in low-impact tasks, delegate those to others.
Free yourself up.
Free yourself up to focus on the things that will make the biggest difference.
Makes sense.
And this actually ties back nicely to the book's acknowledgments,
Hmm.
where Grove highlights his own work at Intel as a real-world example of applying these leverage principles.
So he walks the walk.
He does.
That's great.
Now, delegation is a powerful tool for increasing leverage.
It is, but it can be scary.
It can be. But Grove is very clear that delegation must go hand in hand with monitoring.
Right, you can't just delegate and forget about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he suggests monitoring at the lowest value stage.
So like what? Checking in early and often?
Yeah, like reviewing reports in their draft stage rather than waiting for the final polished version.
Catch those errors before they snowball.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and preventing problems before they become major headaches.
Smart.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Okay.
Grove talks about 3 modes of control that operate within organizations.
All right, 3 modes of control. I'm intrigued.
So these are free market forces, contractual obligations, and cultural values.
Okay, that's an interesting mix.
And understanding which mode is most appropriate for a given situation, that's crucial for effective management.
So it's not one size fits all.
No, it's all about context.
Gotcha.
He uses this anecdote about a new manager struggling to adapt to Intel's environment to illustrate this point.
Oh, I love a good story. Tell me more.
So this manager, he was used to a more traditional hierarchical environment,
Okay.
where things were clearly defined and predictable.
Right, more command and control.
Exactly.
Right.
But Intel's culture was very different, much more fast-paced
Yep.
and results-oriented.
More dynamic.
Yeah, and he talks about high levels of what he calls CUA, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity,
CUA. Got it.
which are common in these fast-moving, innovative environments.
So this manager was thrown off balance.
Completely. He wasn't used to that level of CUA.
So the takeaway here is to be aware of the context
Yes.
and adjust your management style accordingly.
Precisely. Sometimes it's about clear contracts and expectations, and sometimes it's about tapping into those shared values to get things done.
It's about reading the room, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of shared values, that leads us into Grove's thoughts on motivation.
All right, motivation, one of my favorite topics.
It's such a key part of management.
Absolutely.
And Grove firmly believes that motivation comes from within.
It's got to be intrinsic, right?
It does. It can't be forced.
You can't just make someone motivated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he compares it to, like, coaching a sports team.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You can provide the best training, equipment, facilities,
Give them all the tools.
but ultimately it's the athlete's own drive and determination that determines their performance.
Right, they got to want it.
They do. So the manager's role is more like creating the conditions where that inner drive can flourish.
Set the stage for success.
Exactly. And understand what drives that inner drive? Grove turns to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, yeah, that classic pyramid.
Yes, it shows how human needs progress, from basic physiological needs like food and shelter,
The foundation.
to safety, belonging, esteem, and ultimately self-actualization at the top.
So you can't really worry about self-actualization if you're worried about where your next meal is coming from.
Exactly. And as managers, or really anyone who works with others,
Yeah.
understanding this hierarchy can help us create an environment that supports people at every level.
Meets them where they are.
Precisely. So fair compensation, benefits, those address those basic physiological and safety needs.
Okay.
Then fostering a sense of community and belonging, that addresses those social needs.
Makes sense.
And offering opportunities for growth, recognition, responsibility, those can address esteem needs.
So what about that top level self-actualization?
That's the big one, right?
It is. It seems a bit more, I don't know, elusive.
It does, especially in a work context.
Yeah.
But it's about fulfilling your potential, finding meaning and purpose in what you do, feeling challenged and engaged.
So how can managers foster that?
Grove believed that managers can play a role by giving people opportunities for growth, autonomy, and creative problem solving.
Give them space to spread their wings?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He also emphasizes the importance of providing regular task-relevant feedback.
Not just once a year at performance review time.
No, it's got to be ongoing.
Makes sense.
He even says that for people who are driven by achievement, feedback itself can be a powerful motivator.
I can see that.
Think about it. If you were learning a new skill, wouldn't you want constant feedback to tell you how you're doing and how to get better?
Absolutely. Feedback is essential for growth.
It is. It's the same with work. It helps people see their progress,
Hmm.
identify areas where they can improve, and just stay motivated.
Powerful stuff.
And speaking of motivation, Grove makes an interesting point about money.
Okay. Money talks.
It does. But while money is important for meeting those basic needs we talked about, it's not necessarily a primary motivator once those needs are met.
So once you're comfortable, a bigger paycheck doesn't necessarily translate to more motivation.
Not always, no.
Interesting.
And for people who are driven by self-actualization, the work itself becomes the biggest motivator.
They find meaning in the work itself.
They do. They want to see the impact of their efforts, feel a sense of accomplishment, know that they're making a meaningful contribution.
That makes sense.
And he also touches on the role of fear as a motivator.
Fear.
Yeah, he acknowledges that it can be effective in the short term.
In a pen.
But ultimately, it's not sustainable or healthy in the long run.
It creates a toxic environment.
It does. It's like that saying, you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Right. Fear might get people moving, but it doesn't create a positive or inspiring work environment.
Exactly. Now, one of the most powerful and practical concepts Grove introduces is task-relevant maturity, or TRM.
Task-relevant maturity. Okay, I'm all ears.
So it basically describes how competent and confident someone is in a particular task.
Got it.
He uses this great analogy of teaching a child to ride a bike to explain this.
Okay, I'm visualizing.
So at first you have to hold on tight, give constant instructions, be super involved.
Right, you can't let go.
But as the child gains confidence and skills, you gradually let go, right?
And eventually, they're off riding on their own.
Exactly. And it's the same with managing people. Your approach needs to match their level of TRM.
So how do you do that?
Well, he outlines 3 basic management styles that correspond to different levels of TRM: structured, communication-oriented, and minimal involvement.
Okay, break those down for me.
So with a structured approach, you're providing clear instructions, setting expectations, closely monitoring performance.
Gotcha. Very hands-on.
Then with a communication-oriented approach, there's more two-way communication, support, collaboration.
More of a partnership.
Exactly. And with minimal involvement, you basically set the goals and let the person run with it.
Trusting them to get it done.
Yes. Stepping in only when necessary.
So the goal is to help people increase their TRM so they can eventually operate independently and with minimal supervision.
Precisely. And he emphasizes that this isn't about being soft or avoiding difficult conversations.
Right. It's not about being a pushover.
It's about being effective and helping your team reach their full potential.
I like that.
And that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into high output management.
We've covered a lot, but there's so much more to come.
There is. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into Grove's insights. Welcome back, everyone.
We're ready for more high output management.
We are. We left off talking about feedback.
Right. Which Grove sees as crucial for growth and motivation.
It's so important.
It is, and he really emphasizes clarity and specificity when giving feedback.
Yeah, don't just say, good job or bad job.
No, no vague platitudes.
Give concrete examples of what someone did well and where they can improve.
Like, instead of just saying great job,
Yeah.
you could say something like, I really appreciated how you handled that customer's complaint. You were so patient and empathetic.
Right. Show them you notice those specific behaviors.
Exactly, because that's what we strive for in customer service.
And when you need to give constructive criticism,
Right. Nobody's perfect.
focus on the behavior, not the person.
Right. Don't make it personal.
So instead of saying you're always missing deadlines,
Oof. Yeah, that's not helpful.
try something like, I noticed that the deadline for this project was missed. Let's talk about what happened and how we can prevent this in the future.
Much better. It's about problem solving, not blaming.
Exactly. It's about being helpful and supportive, not judgmental or accusatory.
And remember, feedback should be a two-way street.
Oh, absolutely.
Encourage your team members to share their thoughts and perspectives as well.
It's a dialogue, not a monologue.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears and talk about making decisions as a team.
Okay, teamwork makes the dream work.
It does, and Grove outlines what he considers an ideal decision-making process.
Right. Lay it out for us.
So it starts with free and open discussion.
Everyone gets a voice.
Everyone, and they should feel comfortable sharing their ideas and opinions, even if they disagree with others.
Especially if they disagree.
He actually says that the more disagreement and controversy there is,
Oh, interesting.
the more important it is to have open and honest discussions.
So no holding back.
No, let it all out.
The goal is to get all the perspectives on the table
Get all the cards on the table.
so you can make the most informed decision possible.
Informed decisions lead to better outcomes.
Exactly. And once you've thoroughly explored all angles,
Right, really wrestled with it.
then you move toward a clear decision.
And here's the crucial part.
Okay, I'm listening.
Once the decision is made, everyone must fully support it, even if they initially disagreed.
It's about being a team player and committing to the chosen course of action.
Even if it wasn't your first choice.
Exactly. You got to move forward as a united front.
Absolutely. Now, this all sounds pretty straightforward.
It does.
But Grove acknowledges that putting this ideal process into practice can be tricky.
I can imagine.
He talks about this phenomenon he calls the peer group syndrome.
Peer group syndrome, what's that?
It's where people are reluctant to speak their minds freely,
Oh, I've seen that happen.
especially if there are more senior people in the room.
Yeah, like everyone's trying to guess what the boss wants to hear instead of saying what they really think.
Exactly. And Grove observed this even at Intel,
Really?
a company known for its relatively egalitarian culture.
Wow, so even in a supposedly open environment.
It can still happen
So this fear of being overruled or sounding foolish, it can stifle open discussion.
and lead to poor decisions.
How do you combat this peer group syndrome?
Grove suggests a few strategies.
Let's hear it.
First, if there's a clear hierarchy in the room, the most senior person should speak last.
Makes sense. Let the others speak their minds first,
Exactly, it levels the playing field.
and it takes the pressure off.
Second, if there's no formal leader for the discussion,
Okay.
the person who has the most at stake in the decision, they should take charge.
Make sure the right priorities are front and center.
Exactly, yeah. And third, it's crucial to recognize and address the tension between knowledge-based power and position-based power.
Ah, that's an important distinction.
It is, because in today's fast-paced world,
Yeah.
the person with the most knowledge isn't always the most senior person in the room.
Right. Expertise doesn't always align with hierarchy.
To make the best decisions, you need to find ways to bridge that gap.
And make sure the best ideas rise to the top, regardless of who's voicing them.
Precisely. And Grove outlines 6 key questions to ask during the decision-making process.
6 questions. Okay, I'm taking notes.
These questions help keep things focused and on track.
Give us the rundown.
So first, what decision needs to be made?
Okay, start with basic.
Second, when does it have to be made?
Timelines are important.
Third, who will decide?
Who's got the authority?
Fourth, who needs to be consulted before the decision is made?
Get those diverse perspectives.
Fifth, who will ratify or veto the decision?
Checks and balances.
And sixth, who needs to be informed of the decision once it's made?
Keep everyone in the loop.
It's a really structured approach.
It is. It forces you to think through all the key players and timelines involved.
And Grove uses a real-life example from Intel.
Okay, tell us about it.
It involves deciding where to build a new manufacturing plant.
Big decision.
Huge. And he walks through these 6 questions step by step.
So it's a great illustration of how to bring structure to a complex decision. Now let's move on to planning.
Planning, essential for success.
It is, and Grove has a very specific definition of planning.
I'm curious to hear it.
He says it's about taking today's actions to create tomorrow's output.
Uh-huh. It's about connecting the present to the future.
He compares it to planning a trip to the airport.
Okay, I can see where he's going with this.
You consider the distance, the traffic, potential delays to figure out when you need to leave to catch your flight.
Right, you got to factor in all the variables.
And in the workplace, planning involves the same principles.
So you need to define the desired outcome, identify the tasks that need to be completed, establish clear timelines and responsibilities.
And he shares 2 case studies from Intel to illustrate effective planning in action.
Always love a good case study. Bring 'em on.
So one involves a manager named Bruce,
Okay, Bruce.
who's tasked with streamlining his group's operations to avoid overlap with other groups.
Sounds like a challenge.
And the other involves an engineer named Cindy,
All right, Cindy.
who's introducing new manufacturing processes.
So 2 different scenarios, but both require planning.
Exactly. And both Bruce and Cindy, they faced different challenges, but ultimately succeeded
How so?
by applying the same planning principles.
So there's a common thread.
They focused on the future tasks that needed to be done to achieve their desired outcomes, broke their plans down into key results, set clear timelines, and regularly monitored their progress.
So it's about having a roadmap and staying on course.
Precisely.
Now, I know Grove is a big proponent of objectives and key results, OKRs.
Yes, he is.
He sees them as a crucial tool for effective planning.
Absolutely. And he uses a rather unexpected analogy to explain OKRs.
Oh, I love his analogies. Lay it on me.
Christopher Columbus's voyage to the New World.
Wow, okay, that's a big one.
It might seem like a strange comparison.
It does, but I'm intrigued.
But think about it. Queen Isabella had a grand objective:
Okay.
increase Spain's wealth and power.
Ambitious.
She gave Columbus a mission: find a new trade route to the east.
A mission with very high stakes.
And Columbus then set a series of key results: build ships, assemble a crew, set sail by a certain date.
Uh-huh. I see the connection. It's about aligning individual efforts with larger organizational goals.
Exactly. And just like Columbus, we need to be crystal clear about what we're trying to achieve.
How we'll measure success and when we need to deliver results.
And Grove also emphasizes that OKRs shouldn't be used to evaluate individual performance,
Oh, that's interesting.
but rather as a framework for planning and execution.
So it's a tool for alignment, not a weapon for judgment.
He believes that their real power lies in their ability to focus efforts and create alignment within an organization.
Makes sense, everyone rowing in the same direction.
Now let's talk about how work actually gets done within a company.
Okay, the nitty-gritty.
Grove introduces this concept of dual reporting.
Dual reporting, that sounds a bit, I don't know, unconventional.
It is. It challenges that traditional top-down hierarchy where each person reports to only one manager.
So 2 bosses.
He uses the example of a security guard at one of Intel's early manufacturing plants to illustrate this.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the question was, should the security guard report to the plant manager who understands the local needs and issues? Or to the corporate security manager who's responsible for setting security standards across the entire company?
Balancing local needs with centralized expertise.
Classic dilemma.
So what did they do?
They had the security guard report to both.
Wait, 2 bosses?
It's about recognizing that in complex organizations,
Yeah.
sometimes a single reporting line just isn't enough.
Okay, I can see that.
Dual reporting allows for more nuance, where individuals can leverage both local knowledge and centralized expertise.
So it's kind of like creating a matrix structure.
It is, where people have multiple reporting lines depending on the nature of the work.
So like a salesperson who gets promoted to regional sales manager,
Perfect example.
they still need to work with their counterparts in sales.
Yeah.
But now they also report to the general manager of their region.
Exactly. So dual reporting, it's all about breaking down silos and fostering better collaboration and knowledge sharing.
And Grove points out that this concept actually reflects what often happens organically in our careers. As we gain experience and move into more specialized roles, we find ourselves collaborating with and reporting to people from different departments and functions.
It's the nature of modern work.
It is. We're all interconnected.
Now, this concept of dual reporting naturally leads to the topic of hybrid organization,
Hybrid organizations, okay.
which Grove describes as a blend of mission-oriented and functional structures.
A bit of both worlds.
He uses the analogy of our breakfast factory expanding into a nationwide chain to illustrate this.
Okay, so our breakfast empire is growing.
As the company grows,
Yeah.
they face this tension between centralizing certain functions for efficiency
Okay.
and decentralizing others to allow for local adaptation and responsiveness.
So like a large company like McDonald's.
Perfect example.
They have standardized menus and processes, but they also allow for some regional
Like
variations.
the McLobster in Canada.
Exactly, you got to cater to local tastes.
And Grove argues that most organizations ultimately settle on a hybrid structure,
Makes sense. It's the best of both worlds.
much like the way an army is organized.
With specialized units for different functions like infantry, artillery, logistics.
All supporting each other in battle.
And the key to making this hybrid structure work is to strike the right balance between centralized control and local autonomy.
It's a delicate dance.
It is.
Yeah.
And he acknowledges that hybrid organizations can be more complex to manage.
More moving parts.
They require more coordination and communication.
But he believes the benefits outweigh the challenges.
What are those benefits?
Increased leverage, responsiveness, and innovation.
Powerful stuff.
And it's not just limited to large companies.
Oh, interesting.
He even tells a story about a lawyer friend who tried to implement a hybrid structure in his law firm.
So it can work on a smaller scale too?
It can. It's a testament to the adaptability of Grove's ideas.
I like that.
Now, the natural question that arises from this is,
What is it?
who controls what in a hybrid organization?
Right. How do you make decisions in such a complex structure?
That's where those three modes of control we talked about earlier come into play.
Free market forces, contractual obligations, and cultural values.
Those are the levers.
So free market forces are all about individuals acting in their own self-interest.
Like when you buy a car, you choose the best value based on price, features, and your own needs, without any external guidance.
Right, it's a free market.
But in a work environment, relying solely on free market forces often isn't enough.
Why not?
Because you need to make sure everyone is working towards the same goals.
Alignment is key.
That's where contractual obligations come in.
So clear expectations, deliverables, timelines, all spelled out in agreements and contracts.
It's like hiring a contractor to remodel your kitchen.
You have a written agreement that specifies the scope of work, payment terms, completion date.
It sets those clear boundaries and expectations.
But even contracts have their limitations.
Right, they can't cover every possible scenario.
That's where cultural values come in.
Those unwritten rules and norms that shape behavior within an organization.
They're so powerful, often more so than formal rules and regulations.
Grove shares a story about a division at Intel where the sales engineers stuck with the company,
Even though they had no product to sell for a while.
simply because they believed in the company's vision and values.
Wow, that's dedication.
It's a powerful example of how strong cultural values can create loyalty and commitment even in challenging times.
Inspiring.
Now, Grove introduces this concept of CUA,
CUA, again, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity.
which he sees as a key factor in determining which mode of control is most appropriate.
So when things are simple and predictable,
Yeah.
free market forces might be enough.
But as the level of CUA increases,
As things get more, well, complex, uncertain, and ambiguous,
you need stronger forms of control
like contracts and cultural values.
to keep things moving in the right direction.
So it's like a sliding scale.
It is, and he uses another great story here.
Okay, I'm ready.
This time about a new manager who was struggling to adapt to Intel's fast-paced, results-oriented culture.
Culture clash.
This manager was used to a more traditional hierarchical environment.
Where things were clearly defined and predictable.
But Intel's high CUA environment completely threw him off balance.
Poor guy.
It highlights the importance of being aware of the level of CUA in your own work environment.
And choosing the appropriate mode of control accordingly.
Exactly. To further illustrate these concepts,
Okay.
he walks through a hypothetical day in the life of a manager named Bob.
Bob, the manager, all right.
Throughout the day, Bob interacts with his team, makes decisions, attends meetings, even has lunch in the cafeteria.
Sounds like a typical day.
And within this seemingly ordinary workday,
Yeah.
all three modes of control are at play in different ways.
Oh, interesting.
So Bob's choice of lunch is governed by free market forces.
He just chooses what he wants.
His participation in meetings is governed by contractual obligations.
He's expected to be there.
And his strategic planning activities are influenced by cultural values.
He goes above and beyond because he believes in the company's mission.
It's a brilliant illustration of how these seemingly abstract concepts actually operate in our daily work lives.
They're not just theoretical, they're practical.
And it brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive.
Wow, time flies when you're having fun.
We've covered a lot of ground. Effective feedback, decision-making processes, planning for future output, dual reporting structures, hybrid organizations, and the three modes of control.
A lot to digest, but it's also valuable.
It is. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore the art of motivation and the role managers play in eliciting peak performance from their teams.
I can't wait. We're just getting to the good stuff.
All right, welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our deep dive into Andrew S. Grove's high output management.
We've covered so much already.
We've explored how to think about work as a production process, like a well-oiled machine.
Right.
How to make effective decisions.
Crucial.
And how to plan for future output, so we're not just reacting to things as they come up.
It's about being proactive.
Exactly. Now, for this last part, let's turn our attention to the human side of the equation. Motivation.
Motivation, the heart of it all.
It really is, and Grove has a really interesting perspective on this.
Okay, I'm listening.
He believes you can't just impose motivation on someone.
Right, it's got to come from within.
It does. It has to be intrinsic.
You can't force someone to be motivated.
No, you can't.
You can lead a horse to water.
Exactly, but you can't make it drink.
So the manager's role is more like creating the conditions where that inner drive can flourish.
Precisely. And he compares it to coaching a sports team.
Okay, I like where this is going.
You can provide the best training, equipment, facilities.
Give them all the resources they need.
But ultimately, it's the athlete's own drive and determination that determines their performance.
They have to want to win.
They do. And to understand what drives that inner drive.
Yeah, where does it come from?
Grove turns to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Oh, the pyramid.
The pyramid, yes. So it shows how human needs progress. From basic physiological needs like food and shelter.
The essentials.
To safety, belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization up at the top.
Right, so you can't really be worried about self-actualization if you're worried about where your next meal is coming from.
Exactly. You have to meet those basic needs first.
Yeah. So how does this apply to managers?
Well, as managers, or really anyone who works with others,
Yeah.
understanding this hierarchy can help us create an environment that supports people at every level.
So it's about meeting people where they are.
It is. So fair compensation, benefits, those address those basic physiological and safety needs.
Okay.
Fostering a sense of community and belonging addresses those social needs.
Makes sense.
And offering opportunities for growth, recognition, responsibility.
Those address esteem needs.
They do.
Okay, so what about that top-level self-actualization?
Self-actualization, that's the big one.
It is. How do you foster that in the workplace?
Well, it's about fulfilling your potential, finding meaning and purpose in what you do, feeling challenged and engaged.
Sounds pretty lofty.
It does. But Grove believes that managers can play a role by giving people opportunities for growth,
Okay.
autonomy, and creative problem solving.
So give them the space to spread their wings.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of providing regular task-relevant feedback, not just during those annual performance reviews.
Feedback should be an ongoing process.
It should. It's about giving people the information they need to learn and grow and improve their skills.
And stay motivated.
He even says that for people who are driven by achievement, feedback itself can be a powerful motivator.
Interesting. Like it fuels their fire.
It does. Think about it. If you were learning a new skill, like playing an instrument or a new sport,
Yeah.
wouldn't you want constant feedback to tell you how you're doing and how to get better?
Absolutely. Feedback is essential for growth.
It is. And it's the same with work. It helps people see their progress, identify areas where they can improve, and stay motivated.
Makes sense.
Now, speaking of motivation, Grove makes a really interesting point about money.
Money. Always a hot topic.
It is. So while money is important for meeting those basic needs we talked about,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a primary motivator once those needs are met.
So once you're making enough to cover your basic expenses, a bigger paycheck doesn't always translate to more motivation.
Not necessarily, no.
Interesting.
And for people who are driven by self-actualization, the work itself becomes the biggest motivator.
They find meaning and purpose in the work.
They do. They want to see the impact of their efforts, feel a sense of accomplishment, know they're making a meaningful contribution.
That makes sense.
And he also touches on the role of fear as a motivator.
Fear. I don't know about that.
Yeah, he acknowledges that it can be effective in the short term.
Maybe to get people moving initially.
Right. But it's not sustainable. It's not healthy in the long run.
It creates a toxic environment.
Exactly. Like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Right. Fear might get a quick burst of activity, but it doesn't create a positive or inspiring work environment.
Now, one of the most powerful and practical concepts Grove introduces is task-relevant maturity.
Task-relevant maturity. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's often shortened to TRM.
TRM. Got it.
And it basically describes how competent and confident someone is in a particular task.
Okay, so how skilled they are.
And he uses this great analogy of teaching a child to ride a bike.
Okay, I can picture that.
At first, You have to hold on tight, give constant instructions, be super
We
involved.
can't let go.
But as the child gains confidence and skills, you gradually let go,
And
right?
eventually, they're riding on their own, no training wheels.
Exactly. And it's the same with managing people. Your approach has to match their level of TRM.
So how do you figure out the right approach?
Well, he outlines 3 basic management styles that correspond to different levels of TRM.
Okay, I'm listening.
Structured, communication-oriented, and minimal involvement.
All right, so walk me through those.
Okay, with a structured approach, you're providing clear instructions, setting those expectations, closely monitoring performance,
Very hands-on.
very hands-on. Then with communication-oriented approach, there's more two-way communication, support, collaboration.
More of a partnership.
Exactly. And with minimal involvement, you basically set the goals and let the person run with it.
You trust them to get it done.
Exactly. Stepping in only when necessary.
Makes sense.
So the goal is to help people increase their TRM.
So they can eventually operate independently and with minimal supervision.
That's the goal, and Grove emphasizes that this isn't about being soft or avoiding difficult conversations.
Right, you still need to hold people accountable.
You do. It's about being effective and helping your team reach their full potential.
I like that.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into High Output Management by Andrew S. Grove.
Wow, what a journey.
We covered so much ground. Management as a production process, indicators, leverage, motivation, feedback, decision-making, planning, and task-relevant maturity.
So much packed into this one book.
It really is. Grove's insights are just as relevant today as they were when the book was first published.
I can definitely see that.
Whether you're a CEO or an individual contributor,
Yeah.
these principles can help you increase your output, your impact, and your overall effectiveness.
So any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. Identifying those limiting steps, increasing your leverage, creating that environment where motivation can thrive.
It's about making every effort count.
And one final thought for everyone to ponder. Grove talks about the power of cultural values within an organization.
Oh yeah, culture is so important.
Take a moment to reflect on the values that shape your own workplace. Are they helping or hindering your progress?
Good question.
Are they aligned with your personal values? And most importantly, can you leverage them to achieve even greater things?
That's something we can all think about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into high output management.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it as insightful and thought-provoking as we did.
Until next time.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.